Chapter 226 What's Wrong? Mia's pulse quickened, and she knew she had to act fast before she went mad with all the things ringing inside her head. With all her strength, she wrenched her arm free from his grip, yanked the key from his fingers, and bolted toward the door, praying she could unlock it before he caught her again. She managed to open the door before Owen could stop her, but she knew he didn't want to stop her this time, because if he had, she wouldn't have been able to open the lock before he caught up to her. The moment she stepped out, she heard his voice from behind. "If you don't believe the things I said, ask Wayner about Mimi, his childhood sweetheart. Run as much as you like, Mia, but you'll come running back to me when you realize you are not that Mimi he likes. We belong together." Mia ignored him and ran as fast as her legs could take her. She ran to a quiet corridor and leaned against the wall before sliding down to the ground, both hands grabbing her throbbing head as she tried to calm herself. Her eyes filled with hot tears of uncertainty and anger. How dare Owen make up lies like that to hurt her? Did he think she would believe anything he said? He was crazy, Mia thought as she fought the pain in her head that intensified with every word of Owen's that played in her head. She didn't stab her on purpose, it was a mistake. You can't punish her for a crime that was committed in the heat of the moment. Those words, without a vision, rang in Mia's head and startled the living soul out of her. She shook her head and denied it. It wasn't a part of her memories, she hadn't killed anyone as a child. Her mother, Elizabeth, had never mentioned such a thing, and she definitely didn't grow up in Mirage Mesa. She didn't know Neil before she met him on the rooftop of Ivy Grove, and she didn't trick him into believing she was his childhood sweetheart. Mia told herself repeatedly to stop her headache, but it only intensified. She sobbed and buried her head between her knees as she forced herself to remember the source of that voice. But to no avail, she couldn't see the visions, only blurry images that hurt her head and made her doubt every single memory of her life with her mother before they moved to Zen. What happened to them before they moved to Zen, and where had they lived? Then she recalled the day Neil had mentioned in his letter that she had brightened his days since childhood. She had made a mental note to ask him about that part when he called, but she'd forgotten until now. He'd said he'd known her from childhood, but she didn't remember anything about that. Who was she, and why did her mother never mention anything about them living in Mirage Mesa? She tried to force herself to remember even a little, but her head hurt to the point she started to sweat, and her heartbeat became labored along with her breathing. As she was gripping herself not to fall unconscious, she heard hurried footsteps approaching her. Then she felt a familiar cologne waft to her nostrils. That familiar scent brought a little peace before she felt his arm grab her shoulders. "Mia, what the hell are you doing here?" came Neil's worried voice as he inspected her body. He had been waiting, and when she didn't come back after 30 minutes, he'd gone looking for her everywhere, including the ladies' room, but had found no one there. He looked down at her worriedly and noticed she was covered in sweat and her face was flushed. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Mia looked into his worried gray eyes and shook her head. Had they really known each other before they met in Ivy Grove? Was that why she was obsessed with gray eyes and felt some sort of connection to him the moment she set eyes on him on the library rooftop? In what way had she then tricked him into thinking she was Mimi? "Nothing," she said. "I just felt dizzy after returning from the ladies' room and decided to sit down here for a while." She lied. If she'd really tricked him into thinking she was his childhood sweetheart like Owen had said, then she'd never mention anything Owen had said in the ladies' room to him until she dug out the truth herself somehow. There was no way they knew each other before. Neil, on the other hand, didn't buy any of her words, but he didn't say anything. He tried to gauge her expression, his eyes searching for any clue of what had happened that made her look so disheveled and flushed. "Mia, if something's wrong, you need to tell me. Please. Do I need to take you to the hospital?" She shook her head again, trying to offer a reassuring smile but failing miserably. "I'm fine, Neil. Just a little dizzy. It will pass. No, you don't need to take me to the hospital again." Mia could tell he didn't believe her with how his eyes were still trying to search hers. She managed a convincing smile and cupped his face in both her palms, then stroked it with her thumb. While still looking at her, he turned his lips into one of her palms and kissed it. Mia felt loved and cared for. She felt warmth surge into her, and she never wanted to lose such a feeling. Never. She then caressed his lips with her fingers as she said, "I am fine, sweetheart. The doctor said I'd have a series of stomach discomforts before it stopped completely, and that's what happened. But I'm fine now. There's no need for us to go to the hospital again, she assured. Neil sighed, raising his hands to place atop hers on his face. He brought them down and kissed each one of her slender fingers before pulling her into his arms to hug her. All right, but next time something like this happens again, you should call me immediately. Don't endure the pain alone in a corner. Okay? She nodded, okay, tightening her arms around his midsection with her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. He stroked her back in a comforting manner that made the tension in her muscles relax, and her headache disappeared like it had never happened. Neil? She whispered his name softly. He hummed, stroking her hair gently. Who is? Mimi? She asked, tightening her arms around him when he suddenly stopped stroking her hair and tried to pull away to look at her face. Neil felt her hold tighten and resumed his stroking with a small smile on his face as he believed she must have recalled the name somehow. Mimi is the girl I told you about in the cabin, the girl my younger self swore to marry when he was older, he said. Can I ask you a few questions? She asked. Go ahead. Did we know each other before we met on that rooftop? Please be honest with me, she said, holding her breath to hear what his answer would be. Neil didn't answer immediately. He silently analyzed what his answer would be. As much as he wanted to tell her everything about their past, he also feared that it might cause some complications with her brain surgery that was stopping her from recalling it. But then, it wouldn't hurt anyone if she knew just a little without the mention of the monster who'd put her through all the pain and trauma as a child. Yes, we knew each other before. A very long time ago, he said. Mia stiffened in his embrace. She felt her heart tremble in her chest at the realization that Owen had been right. Why don't I recall anything about you? She asked, and before he could reply, she asked another question again. Were you being nice to me all this time because you knew me before? I mean, did you love me because of our history in the past? Neil chuckled at all the questions she was asking. Why are you asking all of this? Please answer me, I want to know. Please. All right, you don't remember because it's a long time ago. And yes, I was a little nice to you in the past because we had history together, he said, wanting to drop the topic here before it got to a point where she'd get triggered by something and be in pain for it. The last thing he wanted was to cause her pain. However, Mia wasn't ready to drop the topic. She pushed away from his embrace and looked deep into his eyes. Neil, do you by any chance believe I am Mimi, the girl you swore to marry? The girl who brightened your days in the past and brought you happiness? Do you love me because I am Mimi? Neil could have chosen to lie to her and say she wasn't Mimi to drop the conversation, but no, he couldn't, not when she was looking at him with such eyes that looked so desperate to know more about a past that could not be remembered. And certainly not when he himself wanted her to know that she would always be his Mimi. Yes, he said, cupping her cheeks tenderly, I have loved you even before I knew what love was. You are Mimi, but please don't ask me to explain any further from here. Mia felt her heart shatter into pieces at this revelation. Instead of the happiness that was supposed to come with the revelation that they'd known each other as children, she cried out and quickly hugged Neil to hide the tears. It seemed he mistook her sudden hug for her happiness, and he laughed and stroked her back. Mia couldn't believe Owen had been right yet again. She'd made Neil believe she was some little girl he fell in love with as a child, and now he was with her because of that. How had she made him misunderstand her for this Mimi? And how on earth did everything end up like this? Who was this Mimi? All this while, she'd thought he loved her for her, but it turned out there had been some misunderstanding along the way that made him believe she was his childhood sweetheart. Mia bit down on her lower lip to hold her sobs and cries. She tightened her hold around Neil and buried her head into his chest. She shouldn't have asked him about Mimi because now that she knew about her, she'd feel guilty for everything she'd done. She'd stolen someone else's place. Neil, let's go out on that stroll you told me about earlier, she said, wanting to clear her head of any guilt and forget about everything she'd heard from Owen that made her doubt her existence. Chapter 227 Surprise at the Beach. Neil and Mia followed the back entrance of the hotel to go to the beach. As they walked outside, hand in hand, with the slightly chilly night wind blowing back their hair and clothes, Mia felt a bit more relaxed, but not completely at peace with herself after her encounter with Owen. However, she tried her best to focus on their night stroll rather than dwell on things that were completely out of her control. The beach was dark at first as they approached it, but the moment they stepped onto the sand, Mia got the shock of her life. The ground suddenly brightened up, and she let out a small cry of surprise. She stopped walking, watching in astonishment as hundreds of lamps set in a straight line on the ground lit up their path. The middle of the lamp path was covered with rose petals, their scent swirling in the wind. Mia looked ahead at the lamp path, but because of how many lamps there were, she couldn't see the end of it. Before she could say anything to the man beside her, the lights of a yacht on the sea, which she hadn't even noticed was there a moment ago, turned on, catching her attention. Before she could speak, Neil held out his arm to her and said, "Shall we?" Mia couldn't find her voice. She hadn't expected anything like this on the beach. She smiled through tears of joy and nodded her head, hooking her arm around his as he began to lead her toward the brightly lit yacht where soft romantic music was playing inside. They walked on the path of rose petals, and because Mia wanted to feel the roses under her feet, she took off her shoes and placed her bare legs on the path. "They're so soft," she commented, her voice filled with wonder. Neil chuckled. "I knew you'd like them." The golden light of the lamps illuminated them and their path, casting a warm glow around them. Mia couldn't help but wonder how much money he had spent to get the beach to themselves and buy all the lamps. As they approached the yacht, Neil bent down and carried her up the steps, placing her gently down once they were inside. He walked her to the open deck, and Mia was surprised to find another romantic setting there. A bouquet of flowers sat on a table beside a spread of French delicacies, including escargot, foie gras, and a selection of non-alcoholic wines in elegant glasses. She looked at Neil, her eyes wide with amazement and gratitude. "Neil, this is incredible." Though she'd always wanted to experience things like this, she'd not expected it tonight. Neil smiled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "I wanted tonight to be special for you, for us," he said as he approached her and pressed a light kiss on her forehead. After Rain had told him what Mia wanted, he'd been working on it to make every moment special for her until the day he'd proposed to her, just like she'd always wanted. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she looked around. "You went through so much trouble." "Thank you, Neil," she whispered softly, wishing she hadn't gone to that ladies' room earlier and gotten her thoughts and emotions messed up. She wanted to enjoy this moment with a clear conscience in mind, without having to feel guilty for enjoying something that wasn't supposed to be hers. She didn't know how Owen had found out about all that, but she knew he'd told her because he knew she was the kind to never take what wasn't hers and because he wanted to plant a seed of guilt and doubt in her heart. She hated that he was succeeding in doing that. Mia turned to look at the hotel as the yacht began to sail away from the beach. She shivered slightly at the cold wind of the sea as she watched the shaft of moonlight streaming across the water. Something warm suddenly draped over her shoulders. She looked down and saw it was Neil's jacket. He came around her, helped put her arms into the sleeves, and pulled it at the front to make sure she was shielded from the cold wind. Mia felt her heart swell with warmth as he pulled out her hair and adjusted the jacket for her. "This will keep you warm for the night," he whispered. Then he took her hand. "Dance with me, Mia more." Mia walked obediently into his arms, loving the feel of them sliding around her. Laying her cheek against the smooth fabric of his white button-up shirt, she moved with him in time to the orchestra's love song, vibrantly aware of his legs shifting intimately between hers. This morning, she'd woken up feeling the worst pain of her life where she'd been rushed to the hospital. Then she'd dreaded coming to this banquet even though she could have stayed at home like Neil had suggested. Then she'd been excited to stand beside Neil to make sure no other woman would cross her man in her presence. Then she'd gone through such an emotional roller coaster in the ladies' room. In one day she'd experienced tension, excitement, pain, and passion, and now she was dancing with the man of her dreams. The emotional merry-go-round she'd been on had taken its full toll. She felt terribly exhausted and more than a little giddy, thus, she rested her weight on Neil as they moved along with the music. Her thoughts floated back to the question she'd asked Neil in the hotel hallway about his childhood sweetheart, and she felt that she'd never be at peace until she'd gotten some kind of reassurance from him to clear her mind of it completely. Closing her eyes and slipping her arms around his waist, she called, "Neil." He hummed softly, looking down at her with eyes filled with so much love. "What's wrong? Are you exhausted?" he asked worriedly upon noticing how she was resting on him completely. The last thing he wanted was to tire her out. He stroked her hair as she shook her head. "No. Do you want us to stop dancing?" "No," she said. "I just want to ask you something else again." "What's that?" "If you hadn't known me in your childhood, would you have still loved me in your adulthood?" she asked, holding her breath and hoping she'd get the answer she so much wanted to hear. "No," he said, shattering every little piece of hope in Mia's heart that she was the one he loved and not the Mimi he thought she was. Unable to control her emotions, she stopped dancing and buried her head in his chest, allowing her tears to fall. "I see," she murmured brokenly as she tried to move away from his embrace, but then he held her back, crushing her to his firm chest. "You didn't see anything, Carita," he whispered into her hair, trying to suppress his smile. "If you'd asked me that question before I was sent to prison, my answer would have been no, Mia. But after my experience in prison and then your arrival into my life in the mountains, I realized that even if you hadn't been my childhood little friend, I'd still want you in my life. Heavens forgive me, I'd bring hell to earth to still make you mine. Our childhood has nothing to do with my affections for you now. And recently, I figured it's time to let that part of our life go, a part that has been filled with terrible memories." Mia bit back a teary smile at his words, afraid to believe him, afraid to trust in his words, and unable to stop herself because she loved him. "Look at me," Neil said, tipping her chin up, and this time her glorious eyes looked into his. "I don't know why you're asking me all these questions today, but I have several reasons for asking you to walk with me tonight. I also have several things to ask of you." "What sort of things?" "I would like you to give me daughters with your hair and your spirit," he said, beginning to enumerate his reasons and requests. "I would like my sons to have your eyes and your courage. Now, if that's not what you want, then give me any combination you like, and I will humbly thank you for giving me any child we make." He pressed his palm against her baby bump as he spoke, and happiness began to spread through Mia until it was so intense she ached from it. "I want to change your name," he said with a tender smile, "so there's no doubt who you are ever again, or who you belong to." He slid his hands up and down her arms, looking directly into her eyes. "I want the right to share your bed every night from this day onward. I want to make you moan in my arms again, and I want to wake up wrapped in yours." He shifted his hands and cradled her cheeks, his thumbs brushing away 2 tears at the edges of her shimmering eyes. "Last of all, I want to hear you say, 'I love you,' every day of my life. If you aren't ready to agree to that last request right now, I would be willing to wait until the day I finally made you mine on our wedding altar, when I believe you will. In return for all those concessions, I will grant you every wish that is within my power to grant you. As to what happened in our past when we were little, I want it dropped out of the topic of our love now. Let the past be buried away with the beautiful memories of our present and future." He whispered, bringing her close to him, "Do you have anything else to say, because I'm going to kiss you now." "About our past," she said softly, "I think there are a lot of things missing from my memories. I want to remember them. Can you help me dig into?" "Don't," he commanded. Although quietly spoken, it was an order, and he meant it to be obeyed. Intending to protest his authoritative attitude, Mia snapped her head up, but her lips instantly captured his attention. "Don't even consider it," he muttered harshly. "Your past is not worth remembering." Then his mouth opened over hers in a shattering kiss that sent her spiraling off into darkness where nothing existed except the sensual male lips locked fiercely, demandingly, to hers. His hand sank into the thick mass of hair at her nape, and his tongue plunged into her mouth, stroking and caressing hers, retreating to plunge again, until Mia instinctively gave him what he wanted. Her lips softened and began to move with his, stimulating the desire already flaming between them. Against her, Mia felt the bold evidence of his rising passion, and shudders of pleasure raced through her. Her body joined forces with his, demolishing her control. Mindlessly she arched herself upward in a fevered need to please him more, and his arm tightened across her hips, pulling her even closer to his rigid thighs. He dragged his mouth roughly across her cheek, and even his whisper was hoarse with desire. "Sweetheart, if you continue to do that, we might end up being naked in bed," he said, and pressed his lips to hers again. Slowly the pressure of his mouth gentled and then was gone. Shivering with excitement and exhaustion, Mia weakly leaned her forehead against his chest. Trying to catch her breath, smiling from ear to ear because she knew now nothing in this world would make her doubt Neil's love for her again, not even this Mimi or Owen. Chapter 228 Normal Life. The day after Xavier Galvera's banquet, word spread like wildfire about Neil being the mysterious CEO and Mia Harrison being his woman. The media and people who had taken it upon themselves to ruin Mia's image to impress Owen Sullivan were now the same people trying too hard to please Xavier Galvera by praising Mia in various magazines and entertainment newspapers. Pictures of them, taken on the yacht by the noisy paparazzi who'd made sure to be on their trail on the night of the event, had gone viral, with many netizens shipping the couple after Neil's words at the banquet about their relationship. Furthermore, many fashion houses that had been sending gifts to Mia when she was in a relationship with Owen, but stopped when she broke their engagement, resumed sending gifts in large amounts. All the gifts and product samples that arrived at their house were so numerous that Mia had to make room in one of the guest rooms to keep them. There were so many that she didn't even have time to open them. Numerous invitations from influential families who wanted a chance to speak with Xavier were sent to Mia, inviting her to their events. Mia's social media accounts were now unbanned, and Talkwave Productions, where she had worked before, had been sold to new management who were determined to have her back. She received their emails and their apologies for everything, and they were even willing to double her pay with weekly bonuses if she would return as the face of their company. As much as Mia would love to resume her work and be productive again, her doctor had warned her against it for now. She had been advised to stay away from stress or work until she had given birth, which was months away. She showed Neil the email this morning when she received it, and he had also suggested the same thing she was thinking. She could accept the proposal now and start her work after she had given birth. Though it had been 3 days since Neil's banquet and their romantic night on the yacht, where Mia had thought Neil would propose but had not, she didn't mind too much. However, waking up alone in the guest room made her feel gloomy all the time. To make matters worse, it seemed Neil was doing it on purpose now. Every night, he escorted her to the guest room and bid her good night with a kiss on the forehead. Last night, she purposely went to their room and pretended to be asleep after hearing his car stop at the entrance so he'd know she had decided to return to their room. However, to her utter disbelief, Neil had walked up to her on the bed, looked down at her for a few minutes, then bent down and carried her back to the guest room. Mia had been upset when she woke up this morning yet again in the guest room. But because Neil was still pretending he didn't know why she was upset when she ignored his greetings, she couldn't keep giving him the cold shoulder when he was trying his hardest to please her at the dining table. Today was Saturday, and among all the invitations they had received, one had come from the orphanage Mia used to visit to take the children out. Before she could say anything, Neil proposed they accept the invitation and take the children to the new amusement park in Mirage Mesa this weekend. "Really?" Mia exclaimed, her excitement evident in her shimmering brown eyes. "Really," Neil replied, taking a sip of his coffee as he looked at his woman, who was grinning from ear to ear at the mention of an amusement park. He had found out from Rain that Mia had always wanted to go there but hadn't gotten the chance before. He had been trying to find a unique way to propose to Mia for the past 3 days, and the invitation from the orphanage had given him some inspiration to take her to the place she had always wanted to go. "I thought you had to work on weekends. How are you going to take us and the children out today?" Mia asked, remembering his busy work schedule lately and not wanting to interfere with his work just because she wanted to go to the amusement park. Though she'd never been to one that she remembered in the past, she wouldn't want to be a bother to his work. "Don't worry, James will take care of everything in my absence," he said, stroking her hair as she sat beside him at the dining table. "But I'll drop by the office to skim through some important documents. My driver will take you to the orphanage ahead of me. I'll come meet you there." "It's fine if you can't go with us. I'll be fine with the children," Mia said, not wanting to make him leave his work for her sake. "I also want to see this amusement park with you guys. I've never been there before." Neil chuckled softly, patting her head. He said, "Now go get ready. I'll meet you at the orphanage." After Mia walked Neil to the door and watched his car leave, she moved quickly to get ready in her room, slipping into her casual blue mom jeans and a crisp white t-shirt, topping it off with a jean jacket. She pulled her hair into a ponytail and laced up her white sneakers. A quick swipe of lip gloss completed her look. She grabbed her crossbody bag and sunglasses and headed out, finding Neil's driver waiting at the entrance. "Ready, Miss Mia?" the driver asked with a warm smile as she walked down the steps. "Yes, let's go," Mia replied, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves fluttering in her stomach. After all the scandal about her, this was the first time she was going out alone and unguarded. She'd been confined in the house for so long, she couldn't help but take a deep breath as the car drove down the road to calm her nerves. The drive to the orphanage was smooth, the city waking up slowly to a bright, promising Saturday. As they pulled up to the orphanage, Mia's heart swelled with joy. All the children were gathered at the entrance, their faces lighting up as they saw her car approach. "Mia! Mia!" they shouted in unison, their voices a joyful chorus. As she stepped out, they ran toward her, arms open wide. "Mia, we missed you so much." One of the children cried out, squeezing her tightly. "I missed you too," Mia said, her heart full. She remembered the days when visiting the orphanage had been a regular part of her life before the scandal, and she was glad her days were getting back to normal now. The caretaker, Ms. Lawson, called out, "Children, go easy on Miss Mia. Remember, you might hurt her unborn child." The news of her relationship and pregnancy had reached the orphanage, Mia realized at Ms. Lawson's words. The children stepped back quickly, eyes wide with wonder. "Miss Mia, are you really going to have a baby?" Alyssa, the most brilliant and talkative of the group, asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. Mia nodded, a soft smile on her face. "Is Owen the father?" Alyssa blurted out, causing Ms. Lawson to scold, "Alyssa, mind your manners." But Mia laughed softly. "It's okay. She's just curious." She knelt down to Alyssa's level. "No, Alyssa, the father of my child is the most wonderful man on earth." Alyssa's brow furrowed. "If he's so wonderful, why isn't he here with you?" "Owen was always with you when you visited us." Mia smiled, touched by the child's concern. "He has something important to attend to, but he'll join us soon." Another boy with red hair piped up. He was a teenager and the oldest of the children. "I read in a book that men who don't put their girlfriends first aren't good men. Don't get fooled by your new boyfriend if he doesn't put you first, Miss Mia." Mia ruffled his hair affectionately, remembering that the boy had seemed fond of Owen every time they visited the orphanage. "Not Neil, Mitchell. He always puts me first, even if he can't be here right now." "Whatever. He can't be as cool as Owen. Owen is the coolest man on earth. He even promised to teach me how to drive and shoot a gun. He also said I could swear as long as there are no adults around." Mitchell grumbled under his breath, already hating Miss Mia's new boyfriend before seeing him. Whoever he was, he could never be as cool as his favorite idol. Alyssa, who stood beside the boy, heard him and also agreed. "Yeah, I think Miss Mia is making the worst mistake of her life by changing her boyfriend. I bet her new boyfriend isn't good looking and doesn't know how to play with kids." Mia heard the kids and only smiled. She couldn't blame them when Owen had made sure to make himself loved by the children. However, before she could say anything, a little girl jumped forward and hugged her tightly. "I missed you so much, Mia." "I missed you too, sweetheart," Mia replied, holding her close. "Is it true we're going to the new amusement park?" another child asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Mia nodded, and the children erupted in cheers, jumping up and down in sheer joy. "Yes, we're going to the amusement park," Mia confirmed, her own excitement matching theirs. As the children chattered and laughed around her, she felt a deep sense of happiness and peace. For the first time in a long while, she felt like everything was falling into place, and she couldn't wait to share this special day with them and Neil and forget about all the bad days and experiences of the past. Chapter 229 At the Park. Mia played with the children in the playground of the orphanage to wait for Neil, but after 40 minutes of waiting for his arrival, with no signs of him and his phone being unreachable, Mia's worry grew. She paced around trying to call him. Mitchell and Alyssa noticed her distress and seized the opportunity to voice their doubts about Neil. "You see, Miss Mia, your new boyfriend isn't like Owen at all," Mitchell declared with a hint of smugness. "Yeah, Owen would never keep you waiting like this," Alyssa chimed in, her expression serious. Mia tried calling Neil again, but the call went straight to voicemail. Frustration gnawed at her as she realized they couldn't wait any longer, or else they'd miss their scheduled time at the park. She made up her mind to take the children to the amusement park herself, but as she turned to her car, she realized it wouldn't fit all of them. Panic flickered in her chest as she realized they'd forgotten to make bus arrangements for the children before coming. She'd forgotten to mention to Neil that she usually rented a bus whenever she was coming to take the children out. As she contemplated driving down to rent the bus, she heard a loud honk at the gate. She looked up, and her eyes widened as a huge, luxurious family bus rolled in. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw Neil behind the wheel, a mischievous grin on his face as he pulled up in front of them. As he stepped out of the bus, Mia got the full view of his attire, and her breath caught in her throat at the sight of him. She'd seen Neil wear different types of suits and casual outfits, but not once had she seen him dressed in blue jeans that matched hers completely. The casual blue jeans hugged his toned legs perfectly, accentuating every muscular curve. He wore a white t-shirt that clung to his broad chest, emphasizing his strong physique, while the jean jacket draped effortlessly over his broad shoulders, adding an irresistible rugged charm to his look. He wore the same white sneakers as hers, but in men's style, with sunglasses resting on his head. His gray eyes sparkled with mischief and warmth, drawing her in like a magnet. With his tousled hair and his nonchalant attitude, he looked every bit the handsome hunk that would make any girl's heart skip a beat. He looked 10 years younger than he actually was in that attire, and she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride knowing he was hers. As Neil approached, sliding his arm around her waist, Mia melted into his embrace. He planted a quick kiss on her lips, apologizing for his lateness and explaining that it took him a while to buy the bus. Mia's eyes widened in disbelief. "You bought the bus?" Neil nodded, a playful glint in his eyes. "Why rent when we might need it again? Besides, we've got our own children to think about. It's for the future." Mia was stunned by Neil's forward-thinking gesture, but before she could respond, Mitchell's astonished voice broke the moment. "Holy whacker Molly, is that who I think it is?" he exclaimed, staring at Neil in awe. "You look so much like Neil Wayner. Are you him?" he asked in disbelief. Any child who hadn't heard about Neil Wayner must be living under a rock, and Mitchell hadn't just heard about him, he dreamed of being like him when he grew older. And with the cool stories of him spending 5 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, every boy Mitchell's age thought him a movie hero. They'd all imagined his escape like in the movies. And Mitchell had glued his pictures on the walls of his bunk. He'd always prayed to meet him in person someday. Neil grinned boyishly at the boy's awestruck expression. He reached out and ruffled his hair and said, "I'll let you guess if I am him. What's your name?" My name is Mitchell. What's yours?" With a smile that made his eyes crinkle at the sides, Neil reached out his hand to the boy. "I'm Neil Wayner. It's nice to meet you, Mitchell. I'm guessing you are the leader of the group?" Mitchell would have passed out from his joy of shaking hands with his hero if he wasn't so determined to be a man and impress Neil Wayner. He wouldn't scream like a girl, and he wouldn't request a hug, but his grin didn't hide his excitement as he said, "How'd you know I am the leader of the group?" "I figured you are. You shake hands like a man and a leader would. How old are you, Mitchell?" "I'm 13 years old," Mitchell replied, trying to suppress his excitement. "Can I sit at the front with you in the bus, Mr. Wayner?" "Sure, you can if my girlfriend is all right with that." Mitchell turned to Mia with a hopeful look in his eyes. Mia chuckled at Mitchell's reaction and nodded her head, grateful for Neil's unexpected and grand gesture. As they boarded the bus, she couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement for the adventure ahead, knowing that with Neil by her side, it was going to be an adventure unlike any other. As they arrived at the amusement park, Mia and the children realized there was some Disney festival going on today in the park. The excitement was palpable as families gathered at the park, the usually familiar grounds transformed into a Disney wonderland for the weekend. Colorful banners featuring beloved Disney characters fluttered in the breeze, and the air was filled with the cheerful sounds of Disney music as their bus came to a stop. The children and their caretaker joined the crowd, their faces lighting up as they spotted Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse greeting guests at the entrance. "Look, it's Goofy." The children pointed for Mia to look, and she looked up and waved, while Neil just looked around with a blank expression as he wasn't familiar with any of the characters the children were pointing out to Mia. The central plaza of the park had been turned into a mini Magic Kingdom, complete with a dazzling replica of Cinderella's castle, where special performances and parades were scheduled throughout the day. Mia's eyes brightened up as she spotted the signboard for the Enchanted Forest from Frozen. The children wanted to go see other Disney characters, but Mia wanted to go see the section where they were now hosting a meet and greet session with princesses like Elsa and Moana. "Neil, let's go to the Enchanted Forest area. I want to show you around and take some pictures." She tugged at his sleeve, but Neil frowned. "Isn't all this festival nonsense for kids?" "The kids are going that way. I think we should go with them," he said with a straight face, already walking towards the direction the kids and the caretaker were headed, but Mia pulled him back with all her strength. "Don't be a party pooper. We didn't come all this way just to supervise the kids. I plan to take many pictures and go around." She glared up at him when he looked around the park as if to question if she was being serious. "I know you aren't the type to do all those things, but loosen up and let me introduce you to the Disney princesses and all the magic. I promise you won't regret this, sweetheart." The Disney festival at the amusement park, Neil realized as they walked around the Enchanted Forest with Mia introducing him to characters from the movie, was not so bad. If it was possible, he'd say his woman had turned into a kid again. Her large brown eyes grew even bigger with every character she saw and introduced to him. He'd never seen her eyes shine this bright before. He wasn't as interested in the characters as he was in her reaction to them and her childlike cuteness. He enjoyed watching her expressions more than whatever she was showing him. Not wanting to miss the chance, he took out his phone and began to click her pictures. When she noticed he was taking her pictures with the characters, she began to pose for him, laughing and blowing him a kiss. Neil didn't realize he was laughing along with her until he noticed people were looking at them, but he didn't care. He took a few selfies with Mia and her favorite characters. "That's all there is to the Enchanted Forest," Mia told him as they walked out of the Enchanted Forest 20 minutes later and stopped at the edge where they'd be seen by the fewest people. "The amusement park is even bigger than I expected," she said, already walking ahead of him. "It's very nice." Neil slid his arm around her from behind, pulling her trim buttocks against him, and smiled into her hair. "You feel very nice." She leaned lightly against him, and Neil felt his body surge and harden. "So do you," she whispered. Swallowing, Neil diverted himself by concentrating on other things in the park. He was impressed that no one seemed to notice his presence in the park. For the past few weeks after his return, he'd never had the chance to be an ordinary person because of how the paparazzi and the people of Mirage Mesa would follow him around taking pictures. But here in the park, he hadn't seen anything like that so far. Neil thought it was fortunate, but unfortunately for him, the Disney music playing in the background stopped, and a voice was heard through the amusement park, who he realized was talking about him. He cursed under his breath, knowing immediately that his ordinary time at the park would be invaded. "We apologize for interrupting the music, but before we resume with the festival, I'd like to spend just a minute to thank the special guest we have in our park today. Our park is honored to have Neil Wayner and his girlfriend present at the festival, and it's no secret to everyone that Neil Wayner hates publicity. I'd appreciate it if you don't crowd him or pester him for autographs. Let's all give him the chance to enjoy the celebration just like everyone else." That invocation was greeted with a loud burst of applause, a drum roll from the bandstand, and friendly grins and waves from hundreds of people aimed at Neil, which he politely returned. Deep down, he was cursing whoever made that announcement just now. He had been moving around with Mia with no one recognizing him, but now they sure as hell did. Chapter 230 Proposal. To Neil's surprised pleasure, the people at the amusement park adhered to the announcement made a while ago, and Neil had the best and most relaxing day in a public place that he could ever remember having in 20 years. Nobody pestered him despite their curious glances at him and Mia. Nor was he immune to the mood of the festival going on around him. He knew the special announcement had been made on his behalf because his company had invested a huge sum in building the amusement park, and they wanted him to have the best experience on his first visit with Mia. The children were still in another part of the park, riding the roller coaster and other rides that Mia had seemed eager to try, but he'd stopped her because of her condition. She often forgot that pregnant women shouldn't ride things like that until he reminded her. As the day drifted into evening, Neil had an amazingly enjoyable time doing simple things like visiting booths where homemade items, from cakes to crocheted linens, were on sale, devouring hot dogs slathered with mustard, and joking with the kids about whether all the games in the booths were fixed or just the ones they'd tried to win. But then, he was with Mia, and as he'd already discovered before, she had a gift for making even the smallest things seem like the most wonderful thing to him. She was also a great favorite of the children, and their affection for her seemed to tentatively include him too. They treated him like they'd known him before, and he'd never known children to be this fun until today. Especially the boy, Mitchell, who made him seem like some kind of a big hero. Neil had never laughed nor played as much as he did today in the park. And now that he was at the amusement park with her and the children seemed to like him for her as they kept asking when they'd be getting married, Neil was dying to prove to the world and to them by sliding the ring he'd chosen this morning on his way to the orphanage onto her finger. But he was waiting for the right moment. After Rain had told him what Mia had always wanted, a special proposal, he was adamantly determined that his proposal would be joyous, memorable, and special. Now, as he walked with her through the noisy, brightly lit carnival grounds at sunset, he was well aware of the 7-carat radiant cut diamond in his pocket as well as the smiling, curious glances of the hundreds of Mirage Mesa citizens who were enjoying the carnival rides and booths, and all of whom were undoubtedly trying to hold back from approaching them after the announcement had been made. Occasionally, he noticed people taking pictures of them, but they were discreet about it. "Want to ride the Ferris wheel?" Neil asked her when Mia paused to look up at it. He'd not allowed her on the roller coaster ride, but the Ferris wheel looked safer. "Only if you promise you won't make the seat rock like you did earlier when we rode the train," she said, pulling off a piece of her pink cotton candy and subconsciously feeding it to him when he opened his mouth to her to feed him. "I wouldn't dream of it," Neil lied, chewing it. "Mia, that stuff tastes terrible. How can you eat it?" "Give me another bite," he said, shamelessly opening his mouth to her again. She laughed and pulled off another sticky pink glob and fed it to him, chuckling even harder when he playfully bit her finger. Ouch. She smacked his shoulder and licked the finger he bit. Then she glared up at him. "I meant what I said about rocking the seat, Neil," she warned when he pulled her forward to get a ticket for their ride. Well, a little edgy about Ferris wheels." "You?" he said in disbelief. "The woman who nearly got me killed a few minutes ago in that flying rocket capsule thing when you made it spin us around. That was different. We were enclosed in a cage. Ferris wheels," she said as she tipped her head back looking at the very high Ferris wheel, "are open and a little scary." Neil was about to walk up to the ticket booth when he heard a barker call out from behind them, "Step right up and win a genuine gold-filled ring set with simulated jewels. Shoot 5 ducks and win your girl a ring. Shoot 10, and win a giant teddy bear for her to cuddle." Neil stopped in his tracks, turned around, and glanced at the mechanical ducks moving in an endless row, at the fake shotguns propped in the booth, and the tray of rings with huge glittering fake jewels in every color from egg yolk yellow to ruby red. And inspiration struck him. His gray eyes brightened up immediately. "I thought you wanted to ride the Ferris wheel," Mia said, as he took her arm and turned her firmly around towards the booth of the shotguns. "First," he announced mischievously, "I want to win you a genuine gold-filled ring with a simulated jewel." "How many chances do you want?" the man in the booth said, his voice trailing off as he stared at Neil's face with narrowed eyes. "You sure look familiar, buddy." He took Neil's money and handed him the gun without taking his eyes off his face. Then he turned to Mia, who was still munching on her cotton candy and staring at the large teddy bears. "Your boyfriend looks just like, what's his name? The man on television everywhere." He prompted her when Neil ignored him and raised the gun, testing the sight. "You know who I mean, don't you, miss?" Mia met Neil's sideways smile with a provocative one from beneath her lashes. "The good-looking guy," she clarified, talking to the man in the booth. "Cold, handsome, dark-haired?" "Yeah, him. What's his name?" the man exclaimed, tapping his jaw. "Jason Wallace," she joked, and Neil missed his shot, cursing under his breath. Lowering the gun, he gave her an indignant look and raised it again to shoot the duck. "Nah, not him," said the man. "This guy's taller, a little older than Wallace, better looking, and more successful." He'd recently just seen the news about the man yesterday, but the name he couldn't remember no matter how hard he tried. Neil gave her a smug smile as he dared her to mislead the man again. "Liam Thompson," Mia cried, and he missed his second shot again. "Carita," he warned out of the side of his mouth, his shoulders shaking with laughter, "do you want a ring or not?" "Not," she said smugly. "I want a teddy bear. Then stop drooling over other men and let me shoot these damned ducks before we draw a bigger crowd." She glanced around and saw that despite their obvious desire to adhere to the announcement and leave Neil alone, a large group of people had stopped to watch, drawn to the amazing spectacle of the real-life Neil Wayner shooting a gun, like all the stories they'd heard about him when he was still in the military, except the targets were metal ducks, not mafia hitmen, spies, or bad guys. Neil hit 8 out of 10 ducks, and someone clapped, then hastily stopped when he glared at them. "Turn around, honey," Neil said to Mia. "Why?" she asked, but he turned her around when she didn't move. He then reached out into his pocket, winked at the man behind the booth, and quickly put the diamond ring in the tray with the glass ones. Then he fired twice more and deliberately missed so he'd win her a ring and not a teddy bear. "Okay," he told Mia, picking up the tray, "turn around and pick out a ring." Mia pouted and turned around. "What? But I wanted a teddy bear," she complained, oblivious to the gaping carnival barker who was staring open-mouthed at the diamond ring on the tray. "Sorry, I missed the last 2 shots. Which ring do you like?" he asked, presenting the tray of rings to her. Mia glanced down at the rainbow of large yellow, pink, red, and dark blue stones glittering atop cheap gold settings. And she saw the diamond. Larger by far than all the glass stones, it sparkled and glowed, reflecting the revolving lights on the Ferris wheel. She recognized the cut because it matched a diamond wedding ring she'd seen in a movie she'd watched with Neil a day ago, and when she looked up at him, she recognized the somber, tender look in his eyes. Before she knew it, he went down on one knee and looked up at her. "Will you marry me, Mia Harrison?" he asked. The people who had watched him shoot sensed that something was happening, or perhaps it was the gaping stare of the man in the booth that drew them forward to get a closer look at what was happening. Then they got the shock of their life seeing Neil Weiner on one knee in front of his girlfriend. Everyone began to quickly prepare their cameras. Mia was speechless for a while. Never in a million dreams had she expected Neil was going to propose. She cupped her palm against her mouth to hold her sob as she nodded her head. "Yes, I will," she said softly, shakily. Neil grinned and slipped the ring onto her finger, then leaned down and kissed it. Standing up, he pulled her into his embrace, and she melted into him like liquid, laughing and crying. "Shall we go and ride the Ferris wheel now?" he asked, kissing her forehead and wiping her tears. She nodded wordlessly. He took her hand, and when they turned, the large crowd of onlookers began to take pictures. He didn't glare at them and allowed them to take as many as they wanted. Neil pulled her toward the ticket booth at the Ferris wheel, laughing as the man in the booth where he'd proposed called to the crowd in a loud, stunned voice, "That guy, the one who looks like the famous soldier, just took the biggest damned diamond ring you've ever seen out of his pocket and gave it to her." Almost the entire crowd at the park began to run towards the booth to take a look. "Where are they?" one of the paparazzi who'd been tracking Neil's and Mia's movements all day asked, angling his camera. The man pointed to the Ferris wheel, which was now stopped, with a crowd cheering uproariously at the base of it. "They're up there," Mitchell said, as they arrived with the other kids, smiling at the uppermost chair, on top of the world. As the crowd gathered around the Ferris wheel, looking up at the couple, they began to chant, "Kiss her, Neil. Kiss her." The photographers from the park and the reporters aimed their cameras at the couple in the topmost chair and lent their voices to the effort. With his arm around her, Neil tipped Mia's chin up with his free hand. "They aren't going to let us down until they see us kiss." She bit her lip, her cheeks flushed with color, her eyes bright with love, her palm protectively covering the diamond ring he'd slipped on her finger. "I can't believe you did this here, in front of everyone. You hate publicity." Neil tightened his arm, pulling her closer. "Not this publicity, I don't. The whole damned world," he whispered, lowering his head, "has witnessed our misery. Let them see what happens when a hardened escaped convict meets an angel who believed in him. Kiss me, Mia." In the midst of the cheers that went up from below at the sight of the couple locked in an embrace, a woman hidden among the crowds with her face covered by a mask clenched her fists as she looked up at them. Her eyes were red from holding back tears, and she clenched her fists so tightly that her nails broke the skin in her palms.